Look at that nappy-headed charity case trying to squeeze into our uniform. Derek Hartley sneered, his phone already recording as Kendra Matthews adjusted her cheerleading skirt in the Westfield Academy gymnasium. The 18-year-old transfer student stood alone by the bleachers, her dark skin glistening with nervous sweat as 30 pairs of eyes dissected her every move. Whispered conversations crackling with words like Section 8 and diversity quota, while the head cheerleader's boyfriend zoomed his camera on her natural hair, broadcasting live to his 3,000 followers with the caption, "When the hood meets the squad." Nobody noticed the small FBI Academy keychain tucked deep in her gym bag, or the way her fingers traced tactical patterns on her water bottle habits, inherited from a father whose name could shut down their entire school with one phone call. The Westfield Academy gymnasium reeked of privilege and fresh paint, its polished floors reflecting the banner that read, "State Champions, 5 years running." Kendra had transferred here 3 weeks ago, her transcript mysteriously fast-tracked through admissions despite arriving mid-semester. At 5'7", with an athletic build that spoke of years of disciplined training, she moved with a precision that should have been their first warning. But all they saw was her second-hand Nike sneakers, the careful way she rationed her lunch money, and the fact that she lived in a modest apartment complex 40 minutes away instead of the gated communities where their parents' Mercedes and Range Rovers slept in 4-car garages. "Matthews!" Coach Patricia Brennan barked, her voice cutting through the whispers like a blade through tissue paper. The 43-year-old former NCAA champion had the kind of face that belonged on motivational poster-sharp features, softened by bottle blonde hair and a spray tan that cost more than most people's rent. "You're up? Show us what Roosevelt High taught you." The way she said Roosevelt, the predominantly black school across town, dripped with enough condescension to fill an Olympic pool. Kendra stepped onto the mat, her movements liquid and controlled. The routine started simple. Basic jumps, clean lines, perfect form. The chatter died down slightly as she executed a flawless back handspring, her body arcing through the air with mathematical precision. But she kept it deliberately mediocre, holding back the triple layouts and complex tumbling passes that her father had insisted she mastered during their early morning training sessions, the ones that started at 4:30 a.m. in their basement gym, where he'd transformed his FBI combat training into gymnastics drills that would make Olympic coaches weep. Derek, captain of the lacrosse team and son of a pharmaceutical executive who donated $2 million to the school's athletic program, wasn't impressed by restraint. At 6'2", with the kind of artificially whitened smile that belonged in toothpaste commercials, he embodied every stereotype of East Coast preparatory privilege. His father owned 3 patents for painkillers that had destroyed more lives than they'd saved. But nobody talked about that when the family name was etched in gold on the science building. "Bet she learned those moves running from the cops," he muttered just loud enough for his girlfriend Madison to giggle, her platinum extensions bouncing as she nodded in agreement. Madison Prescott had been Westfield's queen bee since freshman year, her reign built on a foundation of her mother's political connections and her father's hedge fund fortune. She studied Kendra with the calculating gaze of someone who'd never experienced a moment of genuine hardship, her acrylic nails tapping against her phone screen as she composed a post for her Instagram story. "Someone should tell her that affirmative action doesn't apply to cheerleading," she whispered to her lieutenant, Ashley Chen, whose parents owned half the commercial real estate in the county. The tryout continued for another 20 minutes, each girl performing predetermined routines, while Coach Brennan made notes on her iPad, occasionally glancing up with the kind of dismissive expression reserved for health code inspectors at country clubs. Kendra noticed how certain girls received encouraging nods and helpful corrections, while others, specifically the 3 scholarship students trying out, were met with silence and barely concealed eye rolls. The assistant coach, Derek's Aunt Jennifer, didn't even pretend to watch when the Puerto Rican transfer student attempted her routine. "All right, ladies, gather round," Coach Brennan announced, her manicured nails clicking against the iPad screen. We'll be posting the team roster Monday morning. Remember, being a Westfield Eagle isn't just about athletic ability, it's about representing the values and standards of our institution. Her eyes lingered on Kendra for a beat too long. The message as clear as the diamond tennis bracelet glinting on her wrist. As the crowd dispersed, Kendra bent to collect her water bottle, keeping her breathing steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. 3 weeks of this. 3 weeks of whispered slurs, accidental shoves in the hallway, and teachers who somehow always missed her raised hand. She documented everything in the leather journal her father had given her, the one with the hidden recording device that had captured every word, every threat, every moment of discrimination. But she wasn't ready to play that card yet, not until she understood the full scope of what was happening at Westfield. "Hey, new girl." Madison's voice dripped honey over arsenic as she approached, flanked by Ashley and 3 other seniors whose collective trust funds could bail out a small nation. "We need to talk about your situation." Kendra straightened slowly, muscle memory from years of tactical awareness training, keeping her stance neutral but ready. "What situation would that be?" "Well," Madison's smile could have curdled milk. "We have a certain image to maintain. Westfield cheerleaders are ambassadors for the school. We attend charity galas, country club events, political fundraisers. Our parents expect a certain caliber of representation." She paused, letting her gaze travel from Kendra's natural hair to her off-brand athletic wear. "I'm sure you understand." "Actually, I don't," Kendra replied, her voice steady as her phone continued recording from her pocket. The specialized FBI surveillance app her father had installed, capturing everything in crystal clarity. "Why don't you explain it to me?" Ashley laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "She really doesn't get it. Look, sweetie, this isn't Roosevelt High where you can just shake your ass and call it choreography. We have standards here, traditions, legacy members whose families built this program. My mother was a Westfield cheerleader," Madison added, twirling a strand of platinum hair around her finger. "So was my grandmother, class of '68. Do you know what your grandmother was doing in 1968? The question hung in the air like a noose, its implications as clear as the Confederate flag. Derek's grandfather still flew at his hunting lodge, the one where half the school board held their informal meetings to discuss admissions policies and diversity quotas. Kendra felt her jaw tighten but kept her expression neutral, a skill learned from watching her father interrogate suspects who'd committed crimes that would make these privileged children wet themselves. "I imagine she was busy raising her family," Kendra answered carefully, not mentioning that her grandmother had been one of the first black female federal agents, or that she'd spent 1968 infiltrating domestic terrorist organizations, while Madison's grandmother was planning cotillions just like yours. Derek shouldered his way into the circle, his 6'2" frame deliberately invasive as he stood too close, the smell of his excessive cologne mixing with the protein shake on his breath. "Here's the thing, Matthews, every year, some charity case thinks they can walk in here and change things. Last year, it was that trailer park girl from Riverside didn't last a month before she got the message. Year before that, some Mexican chick whose dad cleaned pools for half the PTA." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that his phone's microphone would definitely catch. "They all learn eventually. Westfield takes care of its own." "Meaning?" Kendra kept her voice level. Even as her fingers subtly shifted into a defensive position her father had drilled into her since age 5, thumb tucked, knuckles aligned, ready to break a nose if necessary. "Meaning?" Madison picked up seamlessly. "That accidents happen. Uniforms go missing. Grades get miscalculated. Parents receive anonymous tips about their daughters' after-school activities." Her smile widened. "Did you know that Coach Brennan's husband is the district superintendent and that Derek's uncle is the deputy chief of police? Small-town connections run deep. Is that a threat?" Kendra asked, genuinely curious how far they'd go on record. Her phone was capturing everything, backed up to a secure FBI server that would make these children's heads spin if they knew their words were already being analyzed by federal investigators tracking a larger pattern of systemic discrimination at elite institutions. It's a friendly warning, Ashley interjected, examining her nails with feigned disinterest. Some people just don't fit the Westfield mold, like that scholarship girl last semester who thought she could report Derek for harassment. Poor thing ended up transferring after her college recommendation letters mysteriously disappeared and explicit photos, fake ones, of course, started circulating online. Her family couldn't afford the lawyer fees to fight it. The casual cruelty of it, the way they discussed destroying lives like planning a shopping trip made Kendra's stomach turn, but she'd seen worse in her father's case files, reviewed evidence of what happened when privilege operated without consequence. These children were amateurs compared to the criminal organizations her father dismantled, but their potential for harm was real and immediate. "I appreciate the warning," Kendra said finally, shouldering her bag with deliberate calm. "I'll keep it in mind." As she turned to leave, Derek grabbed her arm firm enough to assert dominance, but not quite hard enough to leave the kinds of marks that would show up in photographs. His fingers pressed into her bicep as he pulled her back, close enough that she could see the burst capillaries in his eyes from last night's cocaine binge at his father's pharmaceutical lab. "You didn't make the team. By the way, Coach Brennan asked me to tell you, save yourself the embarrassment of checking the roster on Monday." "That's interesting," Kendra replied, not pulling away, but shifting her weight in a way that made Derek suddenly aware of how perfectly positioned her knee was relative to his groin. Considering tryouts aren't officially over until everyone performs the mandatory routine on Monday, Madison's laugh tinkled like breaking champagne flutes. "Oh, honey, you really think rules matter here? My mother donated the new scoreboard. Ashley's father renovated the entire gym. Derek's family practically owns this town. And you? You're nobody. A diversity checkbox who's about to learn what happens when you reach above your station. Besides," Derek added, finally releasing her arm as he sensed something dangerous in her stillness. "Your kind always has basketball, right? Or maybe track? Sports that don't require sophistication." The racism wasn't even veiled anymore, hanging in the air like the Confederate monuments the town had fought to keep standing despite federal pressure. Kendra memorized each face, each expression of smug certainty that their money and connections made them untouchable. They had no idea that her father had spent 20 years dismantling organizations far more powerful than their parents' country club cabals, or that every word they spoke was being added to a federal investigation that had started long before she'd arrived at Westfield. "Well," Kendra said quietly, adjusting her bag as she prepared to leave, "I guess we'll see what Monday brings." "No." Madison stepped forward, her designer sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. "We won't, because if you show up here again, if you even think about walking into this gym, things will get very uncomfortable for you. My boyfriend's brother is a senior at Georgetown Law. He loves practicing litigation tactics. Defamation suits are his specialty. Amazing what you can do when you have the resources to outlast someone in court. And my dad's company," Ashley added with poisonous sweetness, "handles background checks for most of the county's employers. Be a shame if every job application you ever submit gets flagged for security concerns. These databases have such long memories. The threats were specific enough to be terrifying to someone without resources, vague enough to avoid direct legal consequence. These children had learned well from their parents, masters of the soft violence that destroyed lives without leaving fingerprints. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed Kendra was exactly what she appeared to be. "I understand," Kendra said, allowing a tremor to enter her voice that would sell the performance to their egos. I'll think about it." "Smart girl," Derek proclaimed, already pulling out his vape pen in violation of school rules that would never apply to him. "Maybe you're not as stupid as you look. Now run along back to whatever Section 8 housing you crawled out of. This gym is for eagles, not pigeons." As Kendra walked toward the exit, she heard Madison call out one last time, Oh, and Matthews? That little recording app you think you're running on your phone? My dad's cybersecurity firm designed the school's network. We've been blocking unauthorized recordings since freshman year. Nobody's coming to save you. Kendra paused at the doorway, allowing herself the smallest smile. If only they knew that her phone wasn't just recording, it was transmitting directly to FBI headquarters via satellite uplink, using encryption protocols that Madison's father's firm couldn't crack with a quantum computer. Every threat, every admission of past crimes, every revelation of systemic discrimination was being logged and analyzed by federal agents who'd been building this case for months. "Have a good weekend?" she said over her shoulder, pushing through the heavy doors into the afternoon sun. Behind her, the sound of privileged laughter echoed off the walls, a soundtrack to their own downfall that they couldn't yet hear approaching. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few luxury vehicles scattered like monuments to excess. Kendra's modest Honda Civica deliberate choice to maintain her cover sat alone in the far corner where someone had already keyed "Go back to the hood" into the driver's side door. She photographed the damage methodically, adding it to the file that grew thicker by the day. 3 weeks of evidence, 3 weeks of patience, 3 weeks of playing the victim while the real predators revealed themselves. As she drove through Westfield's manicured streets, past houses that looked like plantation estates and country clubs that still had legacy admission policies, Kendra allowed herself to think about Monday. They thought they'd won, thought they'd scared off another scholarship student who didn't know her place. They had no idea that Kendra Matthews wasn't just any transfer student. She was the daughter of Special Agent in Charge Marcus Matthews, head of the FBI's Civil Rights Division, and he was about to teach Westfield Academy what real power looked like. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Status update?" She voice texted back carefully, mindful of traffic. "Phase 1 complete." They took the bait. Full documentation acquired. His response came quickly. "Outstanding. Phase 2 authorized." Time to show them what standards really mean. Kendra smiled, a real one this time, as she turned onto the highway that would take her back to the modest apartment that was part of her cover. Let them think they'd won this round. Let them bask in their perceived superiority and generational privilege. Monday morning would bring revelations that would shake Westfield Academy to its rotten foundations, because Kendra Matthews wasn't just there to make the cheerleading team. She was there to expose a system of discrimination that had destroyed dozens of young lives, and she had the full weight of federal law enforcement behind her. The bullies of Westfield had messed with the wrong girl, and they were about to learn that some eagles were actually hawks in disguise, and hawks didn't just soar, they hunted. Monday morning arrived with storm clouds gathering over Westfield Academy. As if nature itself sensed the reckoning about to unfold, Kendra Matthews stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 4:30 a.m., braiding her hair into tight cornrows that would fit perfectly under a cheerleading bow, the same protective style her FBI tactical instructor had recommended for field operations. Her phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. "Eagle 1 in position. All units standing by." The bullies who'd threatened her on Friday had no idea that while they spent their weekend at country clubs and cocaine parties, a federal investigation 20 years in the making was about to reach its climax. Before we dive into what happened when Kendra walked back into that gym, I want to take a quick moment to thank everyone who's been following these stories of courage against corruption. Your comments about your own experiences with bullying and discrimination, they matter more than you know. They remind us why these stories need to be told. If this resonates with you, if you've ever felt powerless against a rigged system, please hit that like button and share your thoughts below. And for those who want to help us keep bringing these stories to light, there's a thanks button right under this video. Every donation, no matter how small, helps us research and share more stories that need to be heard. Stories that might just give someone the courage to stand up when it matters most. Thank you for being part of this community that believes in justice. Now, let's see what happened. When the Eagles learned they'd been hunting a hawk, the Westfield Academy parking lot was unusually crowded for 6:45 a.m. filled with news vans and unmarked sedans that the students wouldn't recognize as federal vehicles. Kendra parked her Honda between a CNN truck and what appeared to be a casual Ford Explorer, but was actually FBI Mobile Command Unit 7. She grabbed her gym bag, the same one from Friday, but now containing something more than just water bottles and workout clothes sand, walked toward the gymnasium with the measured pace of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. Inside the gym, Coach Patricia Brennan was already there, her usually perfect appearance slightly frazzled as she spoke rapidly into her phone. "I don't care what the roster says. Harold, I make the decisions here, not some computer system. What do you mean it's locked? How can a roster be locked?" She spotted Kendra entering, and her face flushed crimson. "I'll call you back. We have a situation." "Good morning, Coach," Kendra said pleasantly, setting her bag on the bleachers where early arriving students were beginning to gather. "I'm here for the mandatory routine. You know, the one required by Title IX regulations before final team selections can be made. You were told not to come back," Coach Brennan hissed, abandoning any pretense of professionalism. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but Matthews." Derek Hartley's voice boomed across the gym as he swaggered in with his usual entourage. His confidence faltered slightly when he noticed the unusual number of adults with visitors' badges filling the bleachers, but his ego quickly reasserted itself. "Didn't we explain the situation to you? Are you really this dense?" Madison Prescott clicked her designer heels across the floor, her phone already out and recording. "This is perfect. Everyone's about to witness what happens when someone doesn't know their place. My followers are going to love this." She had no idea that her live stream was being monitored by FBI cybercrime specialists who'd been tracking her harassment campaigns for months. "Actually," Kendra said, pulling out a folder from her gym bag, "I think everyone's about to witness something else entirely." "Coach Brennan, are you familiar with Chapman versus Westfield Academy School District? Filed this morning at 7 a.m.? The coach's spray-tanned face went pale beneath her makeup. "What are you talking about?" "It's a federal civil rights lawsuit," Kendra explained conversationally, as more students and mysterious adults filed into the gym. Named plaintiffs include Jasmine Rodriguez, the Mexican chick whose dad cleaned pools that Derek mentioned, Sarah Chen, the trailer park girl from Riverside, and 14 other former students whose lives you systematically destroyed for the crime of not being rich enough or white enough for your standards. Derek laughed, but it sounded forced. "You're bluffing. Nobody would take their case?" A new voice interrupted from the gymnasium entrance. A tall black man in an impeccably tailored suit walked in, followed by a phalanx of similarly dressed professionals. "On the contrary, Mr. Hartley, the United States Department of Justice is very interested in patterns of discrimination, especially when they involve conspiracy, racketeering, and federal civil rights violations." "Who the hell are you?" Madison demanded, though her voice cracked slightly as she noticed the FBI badges several of the visitors were now displaying. The man smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made smart predators recognize a bigger predator. "Special Agent in Charge, Marcus Matthews, FBI Civil Rights Division. I believe you've already met my daughter." The gymnasium went so silent you could hear Madison's phone hit the floor. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Coach Brennan sank onto the nearest bench, her legs apparently forgetting how to support her weight. The growing crowd of students began whispering frantically, phones appearing like weapons as they documented the unfolding drama. "That's impossible," Ashley Chen stammered. "We checked. We always check." Her record said exactly what we wanted them to say. Agent Matthews continued, walking to stand beside his daughter. "You see, Westfield Academy has been under federal investigation for 2 years. We've documented patterns of discrimination, harassment, and criminal conspiracy that would make your parents' lawyers weep, but we needed current evidence. Someone on the inside to document the ongoing crimes. Someone like Kendra." "You sent your daughter undercover?" Coach Brennan's voice was barely a whisper. "To a high school? Undercover implies deception. Kendra said, finally allowing her real self to surface the confidence, the training, the steel beneath the surface. Everything I told you was true. I am a transfer student. I did try out for cheerleading. I just didn't mention that I'm also a trained federal witness who's been documenting every single violation of federal law you've committed. Every threat you made, Agent Matthews added, every admission of past crimes, every revelation of systematic discrimination. It's all been recorded and transmitted directly to FBI headquarters. Your parents' money, your connections, your belief that you were untouchable, that ends today. This is entrapment, Derek shouted, his face flushing red as veins bulged in his neck. My father will. Your father? A woman in a DEA windbreaker interrupted as she entered the gym. Is currently in federal custody? Turns out using his pharmaceutical lab to produce designer drugs for his son's high school parties violates several federal statutes. We found quite the operation when we raided it at 6 this morning. Derek's legs gave out and he collapsed onto the floor, all his bravado evaporating like morning mist. Madison was frantically trying to call someone, presumably her parents, but her phone screen displayed no service, a result of the FBI's mobile jamming equipment ensuring no one could warn co-conspirators. Let me explain what happens now. Agent Matthews said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades dismantling criminal organizations. Coach Brennan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to violate civil rights, extortion, and racketeering. The superintendent, your husband, was arrested 30 minutes ago at your home. We have evidence of grade manipulation, fraudulent college recommendations, and systematic discrimination. Going back 15 years, 2 agents moved forward, professionally cuffing the coach as they read her Miranda rights. Her perfect facade crumbled completely, the mascara running down her cheeks as she realized her kingdom of cruelty was collapsing. As for you students, Kendra took over, her voice steady and clear. Everyone who participated in harassment, threats, or discrimination will be facing consequences. Some criminal, some civil, all life-changing. Your social media accounts, your text messages, your private group chats where you coordinated your attacks, we have everything. The Westfield Elite chat, Ashley whispered, her face draining of color. But that was encrypted. By your father's company? Kendra confirmed. The same company that's now under federal investigation for facilitating criminal conspiracy. Turns out, when you use technology to commit federal crimes, that makes your father an accessory. Agent Matthews pulled out a list. Madison Prescott, your live streams documenting harassment of minority students have been preserved as evidence. The fake explicit photos you created and distributed of Sarah Chen constitute federal crimes. Your mother's political career ends today. She's being arrested at her campaign headquarters as we speak. Madison sank to her knees, designer dress spreading around her like a deflated parachute. The queen bee had lost her sting, and her hive was collapsing around her. Derek Hartley, the agent continued, in addition to drug charges, you're facing federal hate crime enhancements for racially motivated assault and harassment. Those accidents you arranged for minority students? We have witnesses who've agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. Your uncle? The deputy police chief who covered up your crimes? He's in custody too. Ashley Chen. Your family's real estate empire was built on discriminatory lending practices and racial steering. The investigation your testimony will trigger should keep forensic accountants busy for years. Those country clubs your parents own with legacy admission policies? They're about to learn what federal oversight means. One by one, he went through the list, each name accompanied by specific crimes and consequences. The students who'd felt so powerful on Friday now looked like scared children, which is exactly what they were. Children who'd been raised to believe their privilege made them untouchable. But here's the thing, Kendra said, stepping forward. This isn't just about punishment. It's about change. Every one of you has a choice right now. You can cooperate, testify truthfully, Help us dismantle this system of discrimination. And maybe B, rebuild your lives. Or you can follow your parents' footsteps into federal prison. Why? Madison asked through her tears. Why did you do this to us? Kendra studied her for a long moment. I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourselves. Every time you destroyed someone's dreams for sport, every time you used your privilege as a weapon, every time you decided that someone's skin color or bank account made them less human, you built this case against yourselves. I just documented it. We were just having fun. Derek protested weakly. It was just high school stuff. Tell that to Jasmine Rodriguez. Agent Matthews interrupted coldly. Who attempted suicide after you distributed those fake photos? Tell that to Marcus Washington, whose full scholarship to MIT was revoked after you planted drugs in his locker. Tell that to every single student whose life you destroyed for fun. The gymnasium doors burst open again, and this time it was parents arriving not to save their children, but in custody themselves. Madison's mother in handcuffs, still wearing her campaign buttons. Derek's father in federal custody, his pharmaceutical empire in ruins. Ashley's parents, their real estate signs, now bearing sized by federal government stickers. The investigation extends beyond this school. Agent Matthews announced to the growing crowd, Westfield Academy is just the beginning. Every private school, every country club, every institution in this county that participated in systematic discrimination is under investigation. The Southern District of New York has assembled a task force that will be here for years. Principal Harrison, who'd been conspicuously absent, was escorted in by federal agents. His usually pompous demeanor had been replaced by the hollow look of a man watching his life's work crumble. $3 million in diverted federal education funds, an agent announced, funneled into private accounts and used to maintain discriminatory practices. That's 20 years in federal prison. Minimum. You have to understand. The principal pleaded, looking around the gym desperately. This is how it's always been done. The traditions, the legacy families, the standards, the crimes. Kendra corrected firmly. Call them what they are. And yes, we understand perfectly. That's why it ends now. As the arrests continued and the gymnasium filled with federal agents processing evidence, Kendra found herself standing in the center of the cheerleading mat where she'd performed her deliberately mediocre routine just 3 days ago. The same space where generations of students had been told they didn't belong, where dreams had been crushed for sport, where privilege had reigned unchecked. So what happens to the cheerleading team? A freshman asked timidly from the bleachers. She was one of the scholarship students, someone who'd been too afraid to even try out after witnessing what happened to others. Kendra smiled a real smile this time. Tryouts will be held again, with federal oversight, ensuring fair evaluation based on actual ability, not bank accounts or skin color. Coach Brennan's replacement is already being vetted, someone with a background in civil rights compliance and a track record of building inclusive programs. But who would even want to be on the team now? Another student asked. After all this, maybe people who actually love cheerleading. Kendra suggested. Instead of people who love power, maybe athletes who want to represent their school with pride instead of prejudice. Maybe students who understand that real excellence doesn't need to step on others to rise. Agent Matthews checked his watch. The press conference starts in 15 minutes. Every major news outlet in the country is covering this. Westfield Academy is about to become the poster child for what happens when institutional discrimination meets federal law enforcement. As if on cue, the gymnasium doors opened again, and reporters flooded in with cameras and microphones. The perfectly curated image Westfield Academy had maintained for generations was about to be shattered on national television. Kendra, a reporter called out. Recognizing her from the briefing materials, how does it feel to have brought down an entire system of discrimination? Kendra considered the question carefully. I didn't bring down anything. I just held up a mirror. They brought themselves down with their own actions, their own choices, their own hatred. All I did was make sure someone was watching when they did it. Will you stay at Westfield? Another reporter asked. Continue your education here? No, Kendra said firmly. My job here is done. There are other schools, other systems, other places where privilege operates without consequence. The FBI's Civil Rights Division has a lot of work to do. Derek, still sitting on the floor in handcuffs, looked up at her with something like understanding finally dawning in his eyes. This was never about making the cheerleading team, was it? No. Kendra agreed. It was about making sure no one else would go through what Jasmine Rodriguez went through, what Sarah Chen went through, what countless others went through while you and your friends played God with their lives. We're sorry, Madison whispered, mascara-stained face, finally showing genuine emotion instead of practiced perfection. We're so sorry. Apologies are a start. Agent Matthews said, but justice requires more. It requires testimony. It requires restitution. It requires fundamental change. Your sorry means nothing without action behind it. As the federal agents began escorting the arrested students and staff members out of the gymnasium, Kendra took one last look around. The banners celebrating state championships still hung from the rafters, but they seemed tainted now. Achievements built on a foundation of exclusion and discrimination. You know what the irony is? She said to no one in particular. Though the cameras captured every word, I actually would have made a great cheerleader. I can do triple layouts, standing fulls, skills that would have taken the team to nationals. But they were so blinded by the color of my skin and the size of my bank account that they never even let me show them. To prove her point, she dropped her bag and executed a flawless tumbling pass across the mat, the kind of technical skill that would have made any legitimate coach weep with joy. The gathered crowd gasped as she stuck the landing, arms raised in perfect form. That's what prejudice costs you, she said simply. Excellence. You're too bigoted to recognize. Agent Matthews joined his daughter as they prepared to leave. Phase 3? He asked quietly. Already in motion. Kendra, confirmed. The Riverside Academy investigation starts next week. Their harassment drove 3 students to suicide last year. They think their zero-tolerance policy protects them. But zero tolerance for reporting doesn't mean zero crimes. Her father finished. Different cover? Exchange student from Brazil. Kendra said, my Portuguese is perfect, and their discrimination against Latino students needs documenting. As they walked toward the exit, passing shell-shocked students and crying parents, Kendra reflected on the morning's events. Westfield Academy would survive reformed, restructured, and under federal oversight for the next decade. Some students would learn from this, would grow, would become better people. Others would simply find subtler ways to express their prejudice, but at least they'd think twice before acting on it. The sun had fully risen by the time they reached the parking lot, burning away the morning clouds. News vans were everywhere, reporters doing stand-ups with the school as a backdrop. By evening, Westfield Academy would be trending on every social media platform, its name forever linked with federal investigation and systemic racism. You did good work here, Agent Matthews said as they reached their vehicles. Your mother would be proud. Kendra smiled, thinking of the woman who'd also been a federal agent, who'd fought different but similar battles in a different but similar time. She taught me that standing up to bullies isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and standing up anyway. And the cheerleading? Her father asked with a slight smile. Were you really interested in joining the team? Maybe a little. Kendra admitted, it would have been nice to just be a normal teenager for once. But normal teenagers don't have the power to change systems. Normal teenagers can't bring federal justice to those who think they're untouchable. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as Derek Hartley was loaded into a federal transport vehicle, his lacrosse championship dreams replaced with the reality of federal prosecution. Madison Prescott sat in another vehicle, her phone her weapon of choice for so long now evidence in a federal case. Ashley Chen stared blankly ahead, perhaps calculating how many families her parents had destroyed with their discriminatory practices. The really sad part, Kendra observed, is that they genuinely didn't think they were doing anything wrong. They were raised in a system that told them their privilege was deserved, that others' suffering was justified. that maintaining their supremacy was natural selection. That's why this work matters. Her father replied, not just the arrests or the headlines, but the message it sends that no institution is too prestigious, no family too connected, no tradition too entrenched to escape justice when it violates civil rights. As they prepared to leave Westfield behind, a small group of students approached hesitantly. They were the scholarship kids, the minority students, the ones who'd been told in 1,000 ways that they didn't belong. Thank you. One of them said simply, just, thank you. Kendra nodded. Understanding the weight of those words, make the most of it, she told them. The playing field isn't level yet. Might never be completely level, but it's more level than it was on Friday. That's a start. She climbed into her Honda Civic. She'd grown fond of the modest car during her cover and pulled out of the parking lot for the last time. In her rearview mirror, Westfield Academy grew smaller, but its impact would resonate for years. Every private school in the country would be reviewing their admission policies, their disciplinary procedures, their culture. Every privileged teenager would think twice before weaponizing their advantage. Every administrator would remember that federal law didn't stop at the gates of elite institutions. Her phone buzzed with a text from one of the students she'd met during the investigation. Made the team, real tryouts, fair evaluation. Thank you for giving us a chance. Kendra smiled, tucking the phone away as she merged onto the highway toward her next assignment. Behind her, Westfield Academy faced its reckoning. Ahead of her, another school full of bullies waited, confident in their untouchability, unaware that justice was already enrolling in their sophomore class. The war against institutional discrimination was far from over. But this battle, this very important battle, had been won. And somewhere in federal prison, Derek Hartley would have years to think about the day he messed with the wrong black cheerleader, in the day he learned that real power didn't come from daddy's money or uncle's connections. Real power came from standing up for what was right, even when you were standing alone. Real power came from a black girl with an FBI badge and the courage to use it. Real power came from justice. Long delayed but finally delivered. As Westfield Academy faded into the distance, Kendra allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. Then she focused on the road ahead, already preparing for her next role, her next investigation, her next chance to prove that police, no matter how rich, how connected, how protected, would always lose when they messed with someone who refused to be a victim. The cheerleader they'd tried to break had broken their entire system instead, and she was just getting started. The congressional hearing room was packed to capacity, C-SPAN cameras capturing every moment as Senator Patricia Williams adjusted her microphone. Miss Matthews, your undercover operation at Westfield Academy has sparked a national conversation about systemic discrimination in elite educational institutions. Can you tell us about the broader impact? Kendra, now openly identified as a special federal investigator, sat with the same calm confidence that had carried her through cheerleading tryouts. Senator, in the 6 months since Westfield, we've received over 3,000 reports from students nationwide, private schools, charter schools, even public schools in wealthy districts. The pattern is consistent and disturbing. Behind her, a screen displayed statistics that made several committee members shift uncomfortably. 47 schools under active investigation, 236 arrests, over $800 million in discriminatory funding frozen by federal order. The Westfield students? Senator Williams continued. What happened to them? Derek Hartley is serving 5 to 7 years in federal prison, Kendra reported. He's become something of a jailhouse advocate for criminal justice reform. Ironic. Considering his previous views, Madison Prescott took a play deal. 3 years probation and 2,000 hours of community service teaching, cheerleading in underserved communities. She sent me a letter last month, actually thanking me for stopping her from becoming her mother. And the victims? The students who were targeted? Kendra's expression softened. Jasmine Rodriguez graduated valedictorian and is attending Stanford on a full scholarship. Sarah Chen started a nonprofit supporting students facing educational discrimination. Marcus Washington's MIT scholarship was reinstated with a formal apology. He's developing an app to help students document and report discrimination in real time. Your next assignment, the senator asked. Can you tell us about that? I'm not at liberty to discuss active operations. Kendra replied carefully, but I can say that Westfield was not unique. Every institution that believes money and connections place them above federal law should consider themselves on notice. After the hearing, Kendra found herself in the corridor facing a familiar figure, Coach Patricia Brennan, out on bail pending appeal. Looked like she'd aged a decade in 6 months. The spray tan was gone, the designer clothes replaced with a simple suit, the arrogance stripped away by federal prosecution. I wanted to apologize, the former coach said quietly. Not for the cameras or the court, but to you. I spent 40 years believing that maintaining standards justified any cruelty. You showed me what standards really mean. Kendra stood here for a moment. Your apology would mean more directed at your victims. I'm trying, Brennan said. I'm testifying in every case, revealing everything about how the system worked. My lawyer says I'm destroying my own defense. But maybe that's the point. Maybe some things need to be destroyed. As Brennan walked away to face her own reckoning, Kendra's phone buzzed. A message from her father. New assignment approved. Holbrook. Preparatory. Tuition. $90,000 a year. Minority enrollment. 2%. Recent incidents. 17. Your admission letter is ready. Kendra smiled grimly. Another elite school. Another group of privileged bullies. Another chance to prove that justice didn't recognize tax brackets. She thought about the cheerleading uniform she'd never worn at Westfield, now framed in her apartment, as a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories came from battles you never intended to fight. The war against institutional discrimination would continue tomorrow at Holbrook Preparatory, but today, walking through the halls of Congress, where laws were made and justice was debated, Kendra Matthews knew that one transformed cheerleader had changed the game forever. The bullies of America's elite institutions had been put on notice. Mess with the wrong person, and you might just find out their father isn't just FBI. He's the one who taught them that real power comes from protecting those who can't protect themselves. The girl they'd tried to break had instead broken open a system of oppression decades in the making, and she was just getting started.